I am Pippa Macmillan, double bassist with Tafelmusik, an orchestra that celebrates beauty through the music of the past. I'm excited to welcome you to this conversation with my friend and former teacher, Chi-chi Nwanoku. Chi-chi is a UK-based double bass principal, chamber and solo musician. She is a professor of historical double bass at the Royal Academy of Music. Born in London of Nigerian and Irish heritage, she founded Chineke Orchestra with a mission of championing change and celebrating diversity in classical music. Today's conversation expands upon an interview between Chi-chi and myself from the second issue of Tafelmusik's magazine. Welcome, Chi-chi, and thank you for joining us. How did music first enter your life?
When I was a year old, we went to Nigeria for 2 years. We went by boat we took that crossing from Liverpool to Nigeria, and we lived there for 2 years. I was one of those kids. I was always so curious. I needed to know everything about everything. And it was one of those nights. Our village, we still to this day, we do not have electricity in our village. My first memory of music is it was one of those really, really dark nights when the sky was teeming with stars. My dad was holding me, and it was the first time I was consciously aware that that was my dad. And I was asking him about those things shining in the sky, and he told me they were called stars. And then he began to sing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, taught me that song. And I still think of that as my first music lesson. When we were back in England from the age of 3, and then we moved out to Kent, and my primary school was in Kent, a little village called Blean. And I was that kid that 6-year-old kid that if I was that 6-year-old kid today, they would be dishing out the ADHD medication to me, because I was the one that was bouncing off all the walls because I just couldn't get enough action going. And it was the day the teacher said, "Who wants to be in?" And my hand was up before she'd even got to the end of the sentence. The end of the sentence was recorder ensemble. I had no idea what a recorder was, but I knew I wanted to be in it. And so I turned up at the allocated room at lunch break, and was given this little wooden tube with holes in, and off I went. The next experience for me, which really took hold, I used to go down the road to a friend of mine's after school when I was 7 to Pamela's house, and one day I heard this sound coming from a room that I'd never been in before, and so I sort of rummaged, found the room, opened the door. I mean, I'm 5 foot nothing now, so when I was 7, I think I was minuscule. And and her big brother Trevor, who was about 14, was playing Boogie Woogie 12-bar blues on the piano. And I said, I was fascinated to be that close to this piano instrument. And he was dun 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 dun. And so I said, "Oh, can you show me how to do that?" And he said, "Get out of the room, you little squirt," or something like that. He tried to get me out of the room, and I said, I will leave the room when you've shown me how to do that. And so he taught me how to do it. And I realize now, I realize I must have had a natural affinity with it, because I very quickly knew that when your hands went that way, the sound went down, and and I got it very quickly. And I proceeded to go every single night after school. I'd go round to their house, knock on the door, "Can I play with Pamela?" just to get into the house. And then one night, my mum came to pick me up. She said, "I hear when you go to play with Pamela, you don't play with her at all, do you? You just play that piano." and I thought I'd been rumbled, and so I thought I was going to be in trouble and everything. But my parents really understood the essence of what Chi-chi was. I needed to do it. Was something I couldn't help myself. And she said, "No, we can't." I'm the first of 5 children. And, my parents couldn't pay for piano lessons. There's absolutely no way. She said, "We're going to find a way." My parents worked overtime to pay 2 shillings and 6pence for me to have piano lessons. The following week, Pamela's mum wheeled the piano up the road and gave it to me. That was my first instrument. Straight after my first piano lesson, my dad ran out and got a book of Negro spirituals for us all to sing. And so I had to sort of play each individual part, and everybody in the family took a part and learnt their part. And so they would all stand around the piano, and we would sing. We would sing most nights after school when everyone was at home. We would sing around the piano. So that was lovely. And of course, when the Sound of Music film came out, I mean, we barely used to go to the cinema, but that's when that film hit the scene. You know, everyone was talking about it, and my parents managed to set aside enough money for the four oldest ones to go.
I didn't know that. That you and your
Didn't
family
you?
used to sing together and
Oh
listen
yes.
about The Sound of Music. That's fantastic.
We were probably the last family I know that had a television. You know, we would, you know, I think I was nearly a teenager before I got a television. And I was certainly about 15 or 16 when we got a landline phone. 16, yeah, we simply didn't have finances. We didn't have spare money or anything like that. Didn't matter though. We were happy. You don't miss what you haven't got, right?
So tell me how you started playing the double bass and how you ended up as a professional double bass player.
As I said earlier, you know, when I started the piano, that was like formal, you know, I was serious. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And my parents managed to find this rickety old bicycle for me to get to my piano lessons. We didn't have a car. The piano teacher was in Canterbury. We lived about 4 miles outside of Canterbury in the village. As a 7-year-old, I was cycling on my own into a major city to have piano lessons. So that continued. A year later, I was spotted by a sprint coach in Canterbury, and I began my sprinting career. And that was seriously kind of, even though my love for music was just, just palpable, but my thrill, the athletic thing that kind of almost took over. Because it was just the excitement of all the physical energy that it required, as well as and all the training. You know, from the age of 8, training 4 hours a week, 1-to-1 with a teacher. You know, you don't even do that with an instrument at that age. I was having 1 hour a week on the piano, 4 hours a week with my sprint coach. I'd been spotted by him in the Canterbury and District sports primary, where all the primary schools of the district competed against each other, and I'd won the sprint race by miles. And he then spoke to my teacher and my headmaster and my parents before I knew anything about his plan, him wanting to take me on 1-to-1. That started, and it was, for me, the most exciting thing. I responded very, very well to physical instruction. And I think that has played a big part in my music learning as well. But, when, just the physicality of it. I was a very physical, active person. I was born with this muscle makeup called fast twitch muscles, and you can't be turned into a sprinter if you've got slow twitch muscles. You could do marathons and long distance, but you can't be a cutthroat sprinter if you haven't got fast twitch muscles, and I've got them coming out of my ears. And I like fast music, as you know, and I like playing fast. I really should have been a violinist, if I'd taken up a string. And so my sprinting was going very well. I was sprinting at national level in Britain. I just missed qualifying for the Munich Olympics when I was 16. I was asked to play in a women's football match when I was 17 and a half in my last year at school. By then we were living in Berkshire, and I was still playing the recorder and the piano, going through my grades and singing in the school madrigal choir and loving it. I used to love madrigals. But every weekend I was in some part of England in a major athletic stadium competing, and I always used to do the 200 meters as well, and the long jump. I was quite a good long jumper. You have to be able to long jump. You have to be able to sprint to do long jump well. And I was asked to play in a women's football match. It all came to a grisly end because I got deliberately kicked. And it dislocated. It was a typical football injury. My knee completely dislocated, very painful. And it was the first time in my life that I lived in a tracksuit or my school uniform. I didn't have other clothes. I didn't have play clothes. I had a tracksuit and spikes, and that was it. My footwear was school shoes and trainers and spikes, and that was it. And you couldn't have found a happier kid. And so this was a shocking, devastating moment, actually. It's a moment where, some people, it could just ruin their lives, actually, and I was sort of in shock, I guess. I think now I know I must have been in shock, and I didn't properly get time to grieve in a way, because I still get incredibly emotional when I watch athletics. I go through the motions, I go through all the psychological build up to when the gun goes off, because that was absolutely drilled into my psyche. But I had about 3 or 4 weeks to kill before actually having my knee operated on. So in that time, I did loads more piano practice and loads more music, and because I couldn't train anymore. So, and I'd heard that there was a school music competition, annual music competition. I thought, I'd never been into the competition, because I always thought it was a bit strange. How can you judge a competition in music, you know, flute against piano, against bassoon, against the harp? How can you, I just couldn't understand how you could have a competition like that. For me, it seemed like 100 meters against the pole vault or something ridiculous like that. You can't do that. And so I thought, well, I'll just give it a go anyway. I practiced this Chopin and actually won the competition, and didn't think anything more of it. I won the competition, but I didn't get that same feeling of winning when I would go through the finish line of the 100 meters, where you've got those, you can feel people next to you, trying to beat you. It was different. You go on, play on your own, and then you go and sit down. There was no excitement, I couldn't feel that sense of adrenaline when I won that music competition. I went off to hospital for 2 weeks for that operation. The day I came back to school, John Dusek, my music teacher, his son is now a colleague of mine, plays piano. He teaches at the academy, actually, Michael. He plays piano in my chamber group on Endymion Ensemble. His dad, John Dusek, descendants of the composer Dusek, he was my music teacher at my grammar school. Literally, the day I walked back into school, hobbled back into school after the operation, he fell into step with me walking across the playground and said, Chi-chi, the whole school's devastated by what's happened. And, just before you went into school, the headmistress and I, just before you went into hospital, we were all devastated, and you've won that music competition. The headmistress and I, we think you're the best musician in the school. Well, you are, because you just won the competition. We've put our heads together and we think you've got what it takes to have a career in music. I had no idea what he was talking about. He said, if you were to take up an unpopular orchestral instrument, we think you could have a career. Again, I had no idea what he was talking about. And at that moment, I still hadn't said a single word. And we're just walking across the school grounds, still outside. And he said, can you think of an unpopular? And I think, I'd only been to 2 concerts in my life. I'm in my final A-level year at school. And those 2 concerts, I'd been taken to those concerts by the school, because I did O-level, it was called O-level, which is GCSE now. I did GCSE and A-level music. And they were on my curriculum. And we were taken with the school to 2 concerts. I'd never been to concerts. It wasn't in my everyday habit, so, well, certainly not in my family's habits. So he led me to this room in the school, tiny little room opposite the school hall, a tiny room I had never stepped foot in before. In that room stood 2 double basses, and I looked at him and I said, but sir, I'm the shortest girl in 6th form. They've got to be the biggest instruments in the orchestra. He said, yeah, but when have you ever been put off by a challenge, Chi-chi? Come on. He said, and by the way, that prize you won just before going into hospital, because I didn't even think about what the prize was. I knew I'd won it. It wasn't exciting me winning that prize. He said, the prize is that the school pays for instrumental lessons on any instrument of your choice until you leave the school. Put it to good use, Chi-chi. What did I have to lose? So a week later, I was having my first double bass lesson with a trumpet teacher who happened to play a bit of double bass in the army in the Second World War. That was my first double bass. He was wonderful. Reginald, he was called. He was so nice. I loved him immediately. It was love at first sight. In my first double bass lesson, I adored it. And a week after that, he put the bow in my hand in the first lesson. I was just grabbing it like this. And I knew what he taught me the 4 open strings. and that was it. A week later, I was put into the school orchestra, and I was so tickled by it. I thought it was quite hilarious. And there was John Dusek conducting the orchestra, the school orchestra, and suddenly it's like music with a social life, because practicing piano, I was always on my own, and now I'm in an orchestra, and I just thought, this is really easy. I've only got to read one line, because I was playing Beethoven piano sonatas, but I was a very fluent music reader, and I just thought, this is marvelous to be part of the symphonic writing that I had never experienced before. Was extraordinary, and that's how it started. And I had a sort of, I was in my last year at school, Pippa. And I really loved it so much. I got on very well with it. And my headmistress, Miss Atkinson, they were so supportive of me, and said, look, hopefully you'll end up going to music college. And I think, really, what's music college? Like Royal Academy of Music or something. But you've obviously got to learn it a bit more than this before you go. You're not going to get there in 6 months of playing the bass. So she did some research for me and she found there were 2 colleges in England. One was in Bradford and one was in Cambridge, that did like a diploma course in music that offered instrumental teaching. There were only 2 colleges at the time in England that did that. So she said, if I were you, I'd pick the Cambridge one, because there's so much music making going on in Cambridge. I'd heard of Cambridge, but I didn't know about what goes on down there. I'd never run there. I'd run at Oxford. I ran on the same track where Roger Bannister did the first 4-minute mile. In fact, not long after he'd done that, actually, I was sprinting on the same track. Wow. So there's a bit of history there down in Oxford. And it's funny, because we never felt poor. We didn't even know, because we felt rich, actually, because we were so happy. Our lives were rich with all sorts of things that didn't involve money. And it's quite extraordinary when people describe or talk about wealth and quality of life. I've never felt poor in my life. So we got means tested, and she said, you will get a grant. We need to save that for when you can only get it for the 4 years at university. Save that grant for when you hopefully go to the Royal Academy of Music, but you need to go to Cambridge College of Arts and Technology for 2 years. So, for a crash course on. So I literally, and she said, we will find another way of helping to fund that. And she found a foundation, a charity foundation, that paid for all of my fees for 2 years at Cambridge. And my parents managed to cobble together £40 a week, which was my rent. There was no money for food. I had a Saturday job in a cafe in Cambridge, and then in the summer holidays, I also was a bus conductor on the buses going out to Huntingdon or something. I was with the little thing, getting tickets and giving. But in the old days when you used to have bus conductors, I did that in my summer and worked in hotels at the cafe and things like that on Saturdays. So that's so that I could eat. So I worked all through college. Got into the academy, off the reserve list, but scraped in. Did you know about that?
No, I didn't.
So my teacher said, because you have to pay to do an audition at college to go to college. I could only afford to pay for one audition, and my teacher said, "Oh, don't bother about the others. Just try to go to the Royal Academy, because that's where I went." Okay, I didn't know which was different. I didn't know anything about them. I was just doing as I was told. So, and John Walton was in his last teaching year, and had taught the guy that I was learning with. And so I applied to the Royal Academy of Music, and I met all the other people, warming up on all the double basses. We were all put in one place to warm up. And I remember meeting this guy called Patrick Lanigan, I think his name was, Irish guy, really humorous. And everyone was, I was just watching them all warming up and thinking, God, that's amazing. I've never heard people do that on a double bass before. I was really overwhelmed by what I saw around me. And I really clicked with Paddy Lanigan, he's called. And he got a job in the BBC Symphony Orchestra later. But he said, I'm also applying for the Royal College of Music. I said, oh, wow, gosh. I was just impressed with everybody. In the building, being inside the Royal Academy, it was overwhelming for me. So when it came to my turn to do my audition, I went into the room and there was John Walton and Robin McGee, all these guys lined. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know who anybody was. And they, welcomed me in and they said, what are you going to play? I had just done my grade 7, Pippa. I'd gone from 0 to grade 7 in 2 years. Okay, so it was okay, but I hadn't got my grade 8, which is the minimum requirement to apply, but they somehow let me apply. I think I must have got a reference that said, look, give her, and I think because I played my grade 7 pieces, and then they said, oh, and I could see them thinking, oh, okay, so now can we hear your second study? I'd gone way past my grade 8 on piano. So when I sat at the piano, they went, okay, we can see, they could see that I was a good musician anyway, but that my technical level was lower on the bass. And so, I was able to flash around on the piano and impress them. And of course, the oral tests and sight reading, all of that went easily. So they said, well, they read the letter of explanation. They could see, look, I've been playing for 2.5 years on the bass, but she wants bass as first study. So a week later, I got a letter from the Royal Academy of Music, or 2 weeks later. I was back in Cambridge, obviously. And it said, thank you so much for coming to your audition. You are, there was such a high standard of people who applied. So we've put you on, you're the first reserve. And I thought, what? You mean I didn't get in? What am I going to do for another year? I didn't apply to go anywhere else. I didn't get in. I was the first reserve. A week later, I got another letter from the Royal Academy of Music saying somebody decided to take their place at Royal College instead. It was Paddy Lanigan. So I've thanked him ever since. He decided to go to the Royal College instead of the Academy. I had a place. I won a place at the Academy. So, and then in the first week, as you know, you have to audition for which orchestra you're going to play in when you get to the Academy. I'm thinking, I've just auditioned to get in here and I've got to audition again, And so, of course, I was put in the bottom orchestra. But this is one of the things I've said to the colleges in London, to the current principals at the Academy, the college, etc. I want more scholarships for kids like me that have the courage to walk through your imposing front door to do an audition. Kids who've come from very, mediocre teaching. They've got my first double bass was a £50 plywood double bass that lasted me till my first year at the Academy. My first proper bass was I got in my second year. Took me a couple of years to pay for it as well. £750 that cost, but the first one was £50 made of plywood. It was ridiculous. But hey, don't blame me at all. I made it sound good. And so, I got into the Academy. I was in the fourth orchestra with Maurice Miles was the teacher, conductor. And just like in my sprint, because people often ask me this question, how could you possibly have gone from sprinting to playing the double bass? Just almost seamlessly, very easily, I say, because the system of training is incredibly similar. The repetitions, the muscular memory, the build up, the hours and hours of repetition, practice, training, until the moment you perform, the moment the gun goes off, the moment you start the performance on the stage. Very, very similar psychological build-up. And that was so natural to me. It was in my system already. I didn't have to learn that. And so when I come to a first rehearsal, I'm usually I've normally learned I can sight read very quickly, but I'm often concert ready in the first rehearsal, because I know I learned the notes. It's like me turning up to the 100 meters, a race, and Usain Bolt is in the lane next to me, fastest man on earth, Now, if I see you, I know I wouldn't, in reality, I wouldn't never be running against a man, but just thinking of it psychologically, Usain Bolt's in the lane next to me. Take your marks. Am I going to walk to the start line thinking, oh my God, it's Usain Bolt in the next lane next to me? I'm going to come second. I've only got a chance of coming second. If I go to that start line with that mentality, I might as well turn around and walk back to the dressing room, get changed, put my clothes back on. I don't know what kind of a day Usain Bolt's having. He might be having a really bad day. And when that gun goes, I go to that start line knowing I can beat him, because I've done as much mental prep as he has for this race. My personal best time on record is not as fast as his, but he might fall at the start, he might trip, anything can happen. You have to not be beaten by your competitors before you even reach the start line. So that kind of that's second nature to me, Pippa. And for me, I've had to kind of unlearn some of that to be able to survive in this classical music industry, because it's no joke. It's like, no, I'm not coming on stage to try and get to the end of the piece before all of you. We're hopefully going to start and end at the same time. But I want to deliver. Every cell in my body is going into this performance. I don't think about what I might not have had any sleep the night before. I had 2 children. I was playing the night before both of them were born. None of that comes into it. I don't let my day job is playing, so I don't let anything else in my life affect what happens when I either walk to the start line in the 100 meters or walk on stage when there's an audience. I don't bring that to work with me, because you can't play properly. You can't. I've never let that affect me. I've sat on stage crying my eyes out. When my parents died, the tears could flow, but I would play even more beautifully. You can. That's why I feel so lucky that we've got this, because you can just pour all those feelings into your playing, into your music, and there isn't a right or wrong way of what is wrong in music is when people aren't honest with what they're giving, if they're not generous with what they're giving. And I think that's what we can do. It's subjective. You can bring all sorts of moods into your performance today, which will be different from your performance tomorrow. And so from graduating, I came into the Royal Academy of Music the worst by far technical bass player, and because I was suddenly surrounded by all the tools I needed, which is what I say to the principals of the colleges today: give full scholarships to a kid that's come from a very poor background like me, yet they've managed to scrape in with their standard. Give them a full scholarship and see what happens. And both the college and the academy have created 3 scholarships each per year. All the Chineke juniors are winning them at the moment. and Trinity have created a scholarship as well. This is so important, Pippa, because now, and I've created another network, Chineke Conservatoire Diversity Network, where there's about 40 students of colour who we meet on a Zoom, Auntie Chi-chi and all these students, who are all connected to Chineke in some way, playing with the juniors or the senior orchestra. And they have got a network. So they support each other, they ask each other questions, they share painful times, they share all kinds of experiences. I had nothing like that. I didn't have a network. I didn't know any black people until 5 years ago. I didn't know anyone. I literally didn't know anybody. And this Chineke has will be my legacy. This is my lifetime. This is what I was being prepared to do. And I've learned so much that I never knew before. And I managed to go from being the worst bass player at the academy in my first year, and then by my 3rd year, I was principal bass in the first orchestra, and I held that position for my 3rd and 4th years, and I won the bass prize, the Eugene Craft thing, and the principal's prize. Actually, I won 2 prizes when I left the academy. Went to study with Petraki for 2 years, and then I just hit the ground running. I was given a first principal job in the London Mozart Players, and they were an affiliation of the South Bank in those days. They were very prolific on the London scene, much more than they are today. And I was thrown into a principal position at the London Mozart Players. I felt slight imposter syndrome because I was playing with all these professionals, and I just learned how to do it. and I haven't looked back. Sorry if it's a slightly longer answer than you're expecting, but you know me. I'm not known for my sound bites.
Well, I won't have space for all the questions if all the answers.
Oh, keep going, quick. Sorry.
So, obviously, you've been strongly influenced by many wonderful music teachers throughout your life, and of course, your sprint coaches as well. So, how do you view your work as a mentor and teacher, and how have your own role models shaped the way that you view this role that you have?
Well, I believe you can't underestimate the power of a role model. And I didn't have role models who looked like me, but I had people who I respected so much as musicians. And they were Franco Petracchi, who totally liberated me when I went to study in Italy, because he just dances with the bass and he plays with such, he played well with he was known as the most bel canto sound back in the 80s. I mean, what the sound that came out from that bass was just, I would just be mesmerized in every single lesson. I cried in every single lesson, and virtually every single lesson he had me in tears. And so because up until then it was a very old English orchestral based school, which just went. The only lesson I had on bowing was grip it there, and then you push it that way. When you get to the end, turn around and go back the other way. That was all I was told. And if you want to get louder, go down a bit. Literally, no finesse in my bow education. Petracchi just, and then his bow shapes and moves and articulations are different. And I was just, every single, because I came at it so late, I was like 17 and a half, and most of everybody else would start at 11 or, ages like that. And I had so much to learn so quickly, and to see him in the physical form performing was extraordinary. And suddenly I'm seeing the bass really sing for the first time, and not just go, that's, just, I mean, we learned our orchestral excerpts so well at the Academy. I always know an Academy bass student, because they're so brilliant in orchestra. They've got brilliant orchestra etiquette. They know the language of the orchestra really well. It's fantastic training at the Academy for bass players, for orchestra training. Although there's obviously more solo training these days, but it was amazing. And so I only had that training really. And that's why when I got to the end of my academy, I had to play the Bottini concerto in my last year, but I just had to find my way around. I didn't have a method at all. And the Endymion Ensemble, I'd been invited to be a founder member of Endymion Ensemble, and it was 5 wind and 5 string players. And we often played new works that were written for us. We played at Spitalfields Festival, Huddersfield, big festivals, the contemporary music festivals, Wigmore Hall. And quite often I'd see the word solo written above my part. And I think, what? Where's that note? What's that harmonic? I didn't know where anything was. And, there'd be Krishna Osostovich with a wonderful violin solo, then the cello solo. And then it was and I just realized I really needed to know my fingerboard as well as everybody else knew their fingerboard. That's why I wanted to go ahead and study a bit longer. Because by the time I finished at the Academy, I'd only been playing the bass 6.5 years in total. Okay, so I thought I'm going to do 2 years if I can with Petracchi, and I managed to win scholarships that paid for it all, thank goodness. And I had to audition for those scholarships, which I auditioned for 4, and I won all of them. And it was for further study scholarships, and so he just took me on to a different level. I just was able to properly learn to read the tenor clef, properly learn to play a melody, properly learn, all kinds of things. And he was writing that amazing technique book, the Simplified Higher Technique by Petracchi, the orange cover. He was writing that book when I was studying with him. And I did 2 courses with him in the first summer of 1981 when I graduated from the Academy. 3 weeks in Sermonetta, week off, 3 weeks at Siena. So that took me onto another level, and then started in jobs. And then it was a gig he couldn't do, a project he couldn't do. He asked me to do it, and I thought, wow, amazing opportunity to play with this professional you know, and the repertoire was all Bach program directed by Trevor Pinnock. Oh my goodness, and he's so famous, you know, and I've heard recordings of his, and it was Brandenburg 3, Bach, you know, Harpsichord Concerto in D minor, which was one of my A-level things. I knew it backwards, and you know, it was all Bach, and I knew it all. I knew all the pieces, and so to get this opportunity to do it was great. So I came back to England to do it, and right from the beginning, Trevor Pinnock walked up to me at the end of the first day of rehearsals and said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm nobody." I was kind of, why did you come to talk to me? You're not supposed to talk to conductors. It's supposed to be, you know, because you get taught these things. Don't be seen talking to the conductor. You know, we've got all these kind of cynical rules. What's wrong with talking to the conductor? It's ridiculous. But he came straight across and said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Well, no one that you should have heard. I'm a student still. I'm studying in Rome, you know." And he said, "You know how to do this music." I said, "Do I?" And I was really enjoying those rehearsals with him, because he was saying, you know, there we were playing Brandenburg 3, and I had played that once before. I had learnt all the Brandenburgs in class, and I had played number 3 before at the academy, but we did it with a full orchestra, like 8 double basses, and you know, there was a harpsichord, but you couldn't see it. It was somewhere buried in the orchestra. That's how I played Brandenburg 3 before. And so Brandenburg 3, we had the correct amount of players: 3 violins, 3 violas, 3 cellos, 1 bass, harpsichord, directed from the harpsichord. And that's how we were doing it with Divertimenti. And he would stop and say, "Right, bass can a little bit more articulate." And he was giving me these instructions. I'd never had this experience before. Normally the conductor would turn around and say, "Shush, basses," and then carry on talking to the rest of the orchestra. And you know, the only etiquette lesson I was taught by my teacher at the academy was, when the conductor looks in your direction, just nod. Never draw unnecessary attention to the bass section. Those were the 2 things I learnt from my bass teacher. You know, if the conductor looks at you, just nod. So you know, so he thinks you're listening to him. So, but Trevor was saying, "Now, Chi-chi, let's have, you're supporting the chord here," and he was giving me all these instructions about articulation, lifting, propelling the bass line, harmonic structures. I was on cloud 9. I had never heard anything like it. I was so excited by what I was getting and learning from him. And then he came up to me and said that to me, but I got it. You can do this. And he said, "You know, my orchestra, we've just appointed a principal bass, but occasionally we might need 2, and maybe I could get you along." And I said, "Well, yeah." And then I went back to Italy, and then when I came back, I was told, "I think you better get yourself some." He said, "Get yourself some 4 gut strings, and I'll give you a call," or something like that. So I got these 4 gut strings, but I didn't know what they were. You know, never had seen a gut string in my life. You know, and Annette Isserlis, I'd somehow met her somewhere. We were doing something, and she said, "Oh, Trevor Pinnock's been raving about you at the English concert." It wasn't going down very well with their bass player, but he was raving about this new bass player that he'd come across. And of course, their one was getting a bit nervous. And you know, this is where I've had situations where I've gone in and I'm already public enemy number 1 before I've even said a word, before I've even unpacked my bass. And so she said, you know, she was talking to me about because she played with that orchestra, and she said that she knew exactly. And I said, "Look, they've given me this project. I don't know what to do. You know, I've got to put these strings on." And she said, "I know exactly who you're going to go to." And she sent me to Francis Baines, and that was what changed my Baroque. That just gave me the whole vision, just opened in front of me. And there, that bass is sitting in the corner over there. It's yeah, you can't see it from there, but he was teaching me with this extraordinary double bass he had, this Amati. He had 5 strings on it. He had a top C string, and what an eccentric genius. So his bow was in the air as much as it was on the string. And sometimes when it was in the air, I could swear I could still hear it playing on the string. Because as soon as the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment was founded, I'm one of the founders of that orchestra, I had him sitting next to me for as many of those projects as possible. So it was wonderful having him next to me. It was absolutely glorious, and he just made the whole thing speak. And there he was, sort of 75 years old or something. He was just extraordinary. And then I did about 11 years of extra work with the Academy of St Martin in the Fields, and it was this amazing man called Ray Costa, very, very tall, sort of 6'4", slender man. And occasionally I did some of the smaller band with Iona Brown, and there's just two basses, and sometimes it was just Ray and me, and we looked so funny walking on stage together, because he used to play a tiny little bass, a sort of half-size bass, and I'd have a sort of 3/4 size bass, and I'm half of his height, and he had shock of white hair, and he played with such dynamism and energy. He'd come from being a professional cellist, actually, so he had this freedom, because he'd grown up with this freedom up and down playing melodies and things. And so I had a combination of Petracchi, Francis Baines, and Ray Costa. That combination was hugely liberating to me. And I know I'm a bit of an odd one out in more ways than one on the scene, but for me, it was a sense of that sense of freedom, like tearing down the track with the wind whistling past your ears, and that something like that I experience when I'm in full flight in a performance, where you've got that freedom to breathe, when you've got that oxygen running through your bow, and just the whole physicality and energy of producing a line of music.
It's always inspirational. Well, playing next to you was always an incredible experience, and I still, often when I'm thinking, I'll think how you would shape a line, or what you would do with your bow. The things that I learned from playing next to you have definitely stayed with me, and I think about them all the time, even today, which is fantastic for me. I'm very lucky. So briefly, what inspired you to establish Chineke Orchestra, and how can other orchestras learn from Chineke and learn from what you've been doing to become better champions of diversity, equality, and inclusion?
Great question. And it's something that, I think from about 12 or 13 years ago, I started being invited to sit on boards of big music organizations like the Association of British Orchestras, which is the equivalent in America as the League of American Orchestras. But all the members of the Association of British Orchestras all of our symphony orchestras are members of this. I was on that board. That board is full of chief executives, sort of 12 chief executives of orchestras, LSO, LPO, Halle. I was the first musician to ever be on that board, which I thought I couldn't really understand. A music board with no musicians on it. All sort of office people, really, and management. And I just thought it was really, well, they brought me on to bring another perspective. And even though I didn't think about it at the time, I know now that I was also the only Black person on the board. And then I was also asked to be on the National Youth Orchestra board. Again, I was the first musician to be on that board. And then the Royal Philharmonic Society Council and things like that. I've been on several boards. And this, Pippa, is where I first started hearing the word diversity being used frequently. I never heard that word being used when I went to orchestra rehearsals. We were talking about music. That's all we talked about. We were just getting on with that. And yet round these board tables, this word diversity was very high up the list. And every time they were talking about this diversity issue, they were staring at me across the table. I'm thinking, okay, is that why and I'm thinking, oh, is that okay? What am I supposed to know about this? Because I just go about my business. I get invited to work, I go and play. I'm not thinking about anything else but the job in hand, the music. So the more I got to hear about these things, it became very, 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 very curious to me. Very, 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 very interesting to me. And of course, the orchestra that I play with and groups that I play with, they're not, I'm the only, and the thing is, my entire career and school life, I never had a black school friend. I never had a Asian school friend, you know, I mean, like an Indian or Bangladesh or Pakistan. I grew up in Kent. We were the only black family in the area. I didn't see other black children. I didn't see the only, I didn't have a black teacher or anything. The only black people I knew were my family. My dad was the only black person who gave me instructions and guidance in my life, and he was an extraordinary man. And so, and my mum was white. So I was comfortable, and I grew up in a white world. I did not question it. We did not question it. We were taught, especially by Dad, to assimilate. And we did. We just got on with it. When I went to Nigeria, those 2 years, I remember I told you I was there from the age of 1 to 3. I came back from Nigeria speaking fluent Igbo. Okay? I spoke fluent Igbo. As soon as we arrived back in London, my father never spoke to me in Igbo again. And of course, I mean, everyone spoke to me in Igbo in those days in Nigeria, but nobody spoke to me in Igbo in England. Of course they didn't. And so this was the last time. So I mean, of course I can speak some Igbo, but I can't hold a conversation in Igbo. And my mother never spoke to us in Irish, and she taught us how to count to 10 in Irish, and because she was a fluent Irish speaker from Southern Ireland, and we knew a few things in Ireland. That if we'd been naughty, she'd come out with a few. You know, she would say something like "shut your mouth," and it was a phrase that she always said. It said something like shut your mouth and wipe your nose or something. Dundabela mashtahara, something like that. And that's what it kind of that's what it kind of means literally. It was like, but it means like behave yourself, Chi-chi, you know. So we've got a few phrases like that, and I can speak a few phrases in Igbo and count in Igbo and things like that. But in those days, it was not encouraged or popular for a child, for you to speak anything other than English in England. It was not encouraged. These days, we know that if a child can speak 3 languages, all the better. It's so great for your brain. And that's why I encourage every child should learn to read music and things like that, because it's just great for your cognitive development. So I could have grown up trilingual. But as soon as we got back to England, you know, it was in those days when my parents, who'd been through all of that system of no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, all of that, doors slammed in their faces, but it was love that held them together. And so, you know, blacks really had a very bad time in England at that time. People would insult them in the street. I remember a terrible battering that my father took from somebody when I was about 8 years of age, who were walking through Canterbury. It was a terrible, terrible experience where people could just shout abuse at you. You didn't even know who that person was. They could just shout abuse at you. And if my father said or replied or got into an argument, that person could then report you to the police, and my father wouldn't have a leg to stand on. So he was always, it was horrible. It was a terrible time. So, you know, the blacks who came to England, my father was already a British citizen before he came to England, because Nigeria was colonized by Britain. He was asked to come here. So was my mum. Her country was colonized by Britain as well. And yet you get here and you were treated badly. But, you know, they were such cup half full people, both of them. And I think that's why their kids are like that, you know, all 5 of us. We were just taught, look, there's nothing you can't do. If you work hard enough, you can just go for it. I know you're going to go for it. Just work hard. So we grew up with a very strong work ethic. We're not afraid to work in our house, in our family. And I think I've just gone off. Have I gone off piste? I probably have. Where were we? We were on. Why did I create Chineke? So I was just setting the scene, really, that I didn't have an issue with the status quo. The status quo in the industry that I found myself in through injury, because of my knee injury, I ended up in the classical world. It was not in no way surprising to me. It was very easy for me to transition, because I already lived in a white world anyway, because all of my schools, I was the only black kid in my year. And usually in my school, in my grammar school, there was one other black girl. And she was the only girl in the school who didn't speak to me. For all I know, she might have had parents that just said, don't mix with the black kids. you know, like Condoleezza Rice, who worked for George Bush, Secretary of State, I think she was, wasn't she? She was the number 2. And she was an only child and very good pianist. Her parents, she was forbidden, if you read her book, she was forbidden by her parents to play with the black kids in the street. Because black people are raised to think black people are bad. Just look at the treatment look at our treatment throughout history. We are, the stereotypes that we are taught about is that black is bad, black people are bad, and so there's so much that's drummed into us through because of societal behavior that, you know, that maybe that and that's what I thought, maybe this girl has been, for me to go to a school finally and there's another black person, I just sort of wanted to run into her arms, and she just absolutely cut me dead. And there was one day I remember walking along the corridor and we were the only 2 people in the corridor, and I thought, and she was coming this way and I was going, and I'm thinking she's going to have to say hello this time because it's just the 2 of us. And as soon as we got to within the distance where we could have said hello, she just looked the other way, and until we'd passed each other. I've gone through my career in a completely white world, not even challenging it until I start thinking about it when I'm on these boards, when they're talking about how do we diversify our orchestras, and they're all looking at me, well, your orchestra's all right because they've got you, Chi-chi. This is what I was getting all the time. And I'm thinking, so what, I mean, I didn't plan it like this. What am I supposed to, you know, I didn't know what the answer was. Why aren't there more black people around? I don't know. I didn't have the answers, Pippa. I had not even, I'd not learned about black composers all through my musical education. Had you? I don't think anyone. When we walked on to do our first Chineke concert, we played Samuel Coleridge Taylor in the first piece, and we ended with Beethoven. 62 of us walked onto that stage. None of them had played a piece by Samuel Coleridge Taylor before, or by a black composer. Now, that's pretty shocking. So all of that has exploded. When I had my light bulb moment, I realized, it's a great story, but you probably haven't got time for it, but when I knew I had to do this because no one else was going to do it, and there's obviously a call for it because everyone's asking me about diversity. And plus, I might have ethnicity in me, but I only have my own story. I'm only speaking for Chi-chi Nwanoku. I can't speak for Desmond Naismith. I can't speak for Roddy Williams. I can't speak for Jane Atkins in Scotland. I can't speak for any of those people. I can only speak from my own experiences. And we're all completely different personalities, and we've all had, so I mean, we've had some forums with our Chineke players, and some of the stories are not repeatable that some of my colleagues have experienced. Great players, some of our principal players, some of our players who've actually got principal jobs in English, British orchestras have had the most horrific experiences that are not repeated in the 21st century. You know, it's just not acceptable. So I thought, I'm going to put my neck on the line and see what I can do. Because right now, I don't know any are there any black conductors? Are there any? I don't know. So I thought I can only try and find out. So I announced what I was going to do. I think you remember when I was doing it. And people said to me, oh, Chi-chi, it's not going to work. I mean, it's very noble of you, but, you know, classical music is not really black people's music, is it? Black people aren't really any good at classical. You know, looking into my face and saying, it's not really your sort of music, is it, Chi-chi? This is what some of my colleagues were saying to my face. And I'm saying, well, I don't know the answers because I don't have the evidence, because I don't know any. Maybe you're right, but I don't know. Just because I don't know other players doesn't mean they don't exist. But I tell you what, I'm going to look for them. And, you know, very soon, and I said, not only that, guys, I'm creating a junior orchestra as well as a professional orchestra. I just thought, I'm starting with both. I'm not going to say, try one out and then maybe start. No. From day one, the professional orchestra is going to change perceptions, create a pathway. The junior orchestra are the pipeline. And there's every nationality from black to white in our orchestra, both orchestras, but it's majority black. Okay, and I tell you what, it's been what I learned very quickly was not to believe the popular narrative, which is A, Black people don't like classical music, and B, that Black people aren't any good at classical music. It's not true. It was an abundance. Because I found the more that I looked, the more I found. The well of talent runs deep. So if anyone wants to argue about the standards, let's start with Sheku, shall we? Okay. If anyone watched the royal wedding or anything else, you know, we launched him. I found that family. We launched him. He played in every single Chineke junior and professional concert the first 2 years. He was 16 and he was principal in the junior orchestra, and Brymer was leading his brother was leading the junior orchestra, and all the younger sisters played in the orchestra, and the 3 oldest played in the senior orchestra as well. So Brymer and Sheku and Isata, who used to play viola, that's her second study, played in the senior orchestra in the first few concerts. You know, and they all, well, Isata sat number 8 in the violas, but Brymer and Sheku always sat number 4 in the professional orchestra. So they're surrounded by professionals who are nurturing them, supporting them, professionals who look like them. And in the junior orchestra, there's always a mentor in every single section, from a mentor from the Chineke professional orchestra. So these kids aged 11 upwards are now very used to seeing teachers and mentors that look like them. Even the white kids are now familiar with seeing teachers who are Black. It's as important for the white kids as it is for the Black kids, and the Japanese kids, and the Korean kids, and the Bangladeshi kids. And this has been, I've seen transformations happen. I've seen, it's been so transformative for so many people, especially the young ones, winning families who are now saying to me, Chi-chi, my son is going to have a career in classical music now. We're going to support him. Because until Chineke, we just didn't want them going anywhere near, because we look at the industry and they're obviously not going to be supported. But because of Chineke, we've got the support, we've got the belief, and it's literally changing lives. How can that have been a bad thing? I've had the chief executive of the BBC Philharmonic, you know, the BBC orchestra that's based in Manchester. He's currently the chief executive of, you know, he's currently the chair of the Association of British Orchestras board, the board I told you I was on. And I've known Simon Webb. I've known him for most of my career, 30 odd years. And he called me recently, just before Christmas, because now their board is completely white again, of course, since I've left. In fact, I did my 5-year term, and then it was Catherine McDowell from the LSO who said, can't we keep Chi-chi on for another year? So, you know, she was on the board as well. And you know, she didn't ask me if I wanted to stay on for another year, but she just announced it. And so I said, I felt so flattered that she wanted me to stay. So I said, oh, right then. So I did 6 years. And in my final meeting, I said, when you replace me, please replace me with another musician. That was before Chineke. You know, because they were talking diversity, but nothing was happening. I then took action and created an orchestra. And Simon Webb's, now they're desperate to get some ethnicity onto their board. And so he wanted to talk to me about it. So I put 2 of our players up for interview, which is great. Really fabulous players who've got positions in orchestras in England. One has a principal position. And he said to me, Chi-chi, look, whenever because we bump into each other at events and meetings and, you know, conferences and things like that. He said, I love talking to you, Chi-chi, because whenever I talk to you, I always learn something. And I'm thinking, yeah, where's this going, Simon? And so I wasn't quite sure what the conversation way he was calling me. We talked for about 2 hours. And it's basically about finding, you know, talking about possibility of getting people on the board. I said, because, you know, I do not have time to be on a board, right? I'm on the Chineke board, but that's it. I haven't got any more time. But I'll help you find if anyone's interested in joining. And then he said to me, Chi-chi, what I love about talking to you is that you don't edit anything from your brain to what comes out of your mouth. I said, I'm so glad that people like you appreciate that about me, because I'm, you know, I don't have any corners. I don't have any, you know, it's just what comes out, Pippa. I'm not choreographed or scripted, as you know me too well. And so sometimes I say things I think, why did they, maybe that wasn't a very nice thing, or, but not meaning to, but I get it wrong. And I'm the first to put my hands up to admit, yeah, I get it wrong sometimes. I can say the wrong thing, or not meaning to be the wrong thing, but something that might hurt someone. But so then we can talk about it. If they say, look, I was hurt by that, then it's good if they can tell me. So Simon was saying, Chi-chi, I'm going to say to you that when you created Chineke 5 years ago, I thought you were doing the wrong thing. He said, I've never told you this before, because I went up to a concert at the BBC Philharmonic about a year and a half ago, actually, because a Black American composer was having a new commission there, and he wanted me there to support him, this amazing composer. So I went up to Manchester for the day and, saw Simon. Simon gave me the best seats in the house, and he sat next to me, actually, so it's really nice to see him. And so he said to me, Chi-chi, so when you created Chineke, he said, and I wasn't the only one out of the chief executives that thought you were doing the wrong thing. And I said, oh. I said, I did know that some people were a bit funny about it. I certainly knew, because I had some horrible experiences. But so why are you telling me that now, Simon? He said, well, Chi-chi, I thought you were doing the wrong thing because I couldn't see the problem. I couldn't see what was missing in the industry. I didn't see what the issues were. But that's because I'm a white, middle-aged, privileged man. I grew up with a wealthy family, wealthy parents, always had a private education, went to boarding school, went to Oxbridge. And now I've had top jobs, chief executive of orchestras and things like that. And I know that I've got a lot of my jobs because I've had a privileged life. And now, Chi-chi, you have actually opened the door for us all to see something else. Because a few of us disagreed with what you did, because I know all these chief executives from being on these boards, you see. Plus, some of them want to talk to me about stuff, and I talked to their orchestra. I had to give a talk to the BBC Concert Orchestra last week. And so I'm thinking, this is interesting. So what's changed then, Simon? And of course, George Floyd had to be murdered for people to properly start to open. There's so many conversations like this, these interviews, because people are properly now wanting to think about really addressing diversity. And it's not just the players on the stage, but it's the repertoire, the management, the boards of all the organizations, not just orchestras, everything needs to be diversified. So Simon was saying, Chi-chi, of course, the George Floyd incident is something that shook the world. And I can now see, I've been watching your Chineke Orchestra and I properly get it now. He said, I have completely changed my mind. I think what you've done is the best thing. That's why I won the ABO award a couple of years ago. And actually it was Catherine McDowell, the LSO, she was the chair at that time. She presented that award to me on the stage, and her citation said, people like Simon Rattle win that award, he's won it. They give it one prize once a year. This prize is presented to either a single person or organization that has made the most significant contribution to the orchestral life of Britain. And this year, the award goes to Chi-chi Nwanoku. Shocking for me, because, Marin won it a year after me. I said, Marin, so what's it feel like winning a prize after a double bass player? Because no instrumentalist has ever won that prize before. Orchestras have won it, famous conductors, famous composers and soloists, but not an orchestral player. So it was a big deal. It was a flipping big deal, I can tell you. And that is a beacon for someone else to think, I could win that prize one day. This is the thing about the role model. Because those juniors looking at all of us, the fact that Sheku Kane Mason, a black kid who plays the cello well, he's an ordinary black kid who plays the cello well and kicks the football around with his brother like any normal kid. That should just be the norm. Why should it be something to get, it's really crazy. But the power of his, what's the word, role modeldom has opened the door for so many young kids of colour thinking, oh, that could be me. And that whole role model thing is, I wear that responsibility. I don't wear it lightly. I take that responsibility very seriously. And we all know people who, and I'm talking about Black people, who've done very well, thank you very much, in their whatever industry they're in, become very rich and famous, got to the top of the ladder, and then they kick the ladder to one side once they've got to the top of it. And it doesn't help anyone else in their industry. But once I think the whole of my career, Pippa, really for a very long time, has been getting me ready for creating Chineke. And I know that things like, I created the Salomon Prize, which is the prize for an unsung hero in any orchestra in England. Whilst I was on the ABO board, I created that award. Players in the country don't realise it was me that created that award. I had to, it's an award shared between the ABO and the RPS, because I'm still on the RPS council, but I think that just keeps rolling over. And various players, when I've coached things at the academy, I've heard horrific horror stories from experiences from the students of colour who've been at the academy during your time, other times, who've called me and tell me how, when I came in to coach an orchestra at something, how I went and spoke to them, and how that was the first time in their entire academy career that they felt supported or understood or encouraged. And, I think I sort of do that sort of thing naturally because I want to help. It's natural for me to worry things to death until someone's got it. That's no one taught me how to teach, and I just do it. I teach instinctively. And there's many ways of teaching, and there's ways that, if there's anything worthwhile that as a teacher you've got to give, there's one thing that's really worthwhile for a student, and it's helped them in any way whatsoever, then I feel that I've done my job properly. And I cannot take that for granted as a teacher. It's a huge responsibility. I really take it seriously. And so Chineke had to happen, and minds are being changed by it. And certainly the Arts Council of Great Britain, who give these huge awards to these national portfolio organisations, the South Bank, the Royal Opera House, the LSO, all these orchestras are not NPOs. We're not one yet. We're still living hand to mouth, doing fundraising. The Arts Council have put as a stipulation of criteria, when now all of these orchestras applying for grants from the Arts Council have got to talk about what they're doing for diversity. We've really shaken things up. And what Simon Webb said to me and other chief executives, Chi-chi, you have changed the conversation. We can't do this anymore. We can't go on like this anymore. And one of the things I've been very clear about with Chineke, I'm not interested in just sprinkling beautiful black and brown and beige and different colour skins across the stage and calling it diversity. We've got to diversify the repertoire we're playing, and it means we're all doing this wonderful research and finding this incredible music that's been neglected. And my board has got from white to black, black to white is on the board. On the management, Stephen Carpenter is still my general manager. He said it's the most exciting job he's ever had. He's been a chief executive all his life. His whole 35-year career before Chineke, he was a chief executive. And he said this is the most exciting job where he's really felt another kind of purpose. So he said, yeah, I won't say what he said. It's quite funny, but he's, he does say he really feels at this, because he'd left the OEE a year before I created Chineke, and came on board to help, and then wanted to stay. So I employed him. I'm his boss now. He used to be my boss. We were just on the phone this morning.
That's fantastic, Chi-chi. Thank you so much for sharing all your stories with us, and thank you for coming to do this interview. We hope those of you watching at home have found this an interesting and informative conversation. Certainly I've learned new things. about Chi-chi's background. To learn more about Chi-chi, you can visit her website, which is www.chi-chi-nwanoku.com. There's a hyphen between the Chi-chi, but you can look it up on Google. And to read her original interview with us and the full magazine issue, visit tafelmusik.org/magazine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It would be great if they looked at the Chineke website as well, chineke.org, because I've kind of almost neglected my own one since creating Chineke, but that's just chineke.org. But either.
Brilliant.
They'll find Chineke on it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Pippa. And I tell you what, it's people like you, students like you, that make people like me feel super proud. Honestly, I couldn't be more proud as a teacher and a mentor to you. I hope that, I will, we're friends now. I mean, we've always been friends. And I first met you when you were 14 years of age and coached you at the National Youth Orchestra. And I knew immediately that you were going places. I knew instantly. And it wasn't, it was a difficult time, mid-teens, terrible time for teenagers, but I could see through all of that. And it was wonderful when I got that call from you 4 years later saying, do you remember me? You coached me at the National Youth Orchestra. I said, of course I remember you. And you said, I've got into the Royal Academy of Music and I want to do second study Baroque with you. I said, great. And so that's how our journey started. And but it actually started when you were 14, because I always remembered you.
With my dyed black hair at that time.
Yes, dyed black hair. You were goth. You could hardly see your face. You occasionally peered out from behind the curtains. You were the only female in a section of 10 double bassists. You were the only female, and I thought you were the quietest. You didn't say a word. You were just sort of this sort of broody, moody, but you did everything. You did everything more than. And I just thought, she's the best one in the section. She's the one who's going places, and you did. So well done.
Well,
really proud of you.
And thank you very much again for joining us, and goodbye.
Bye, Pippa.